I never imagined that a single moment, a single phone call, could unravel everything I thought was unshakable about my life. But that's exactly what happened 3 years ago when my job disappeared overnight, and with it, the fragile illusion of safety I had spent years building. I was left not only unemployed but utterly alone, abandoned by the people who claimed to be my family. If you've ever been cast aside by those you trusted most, if you've ever had to face the cold sting of betrayal cloaked in familiar faces, then you're in the right place. Hit subscribe and stay with me, because this story isn't just about loss, it's about finding strength when everything you know turns to dust. My name is Eliza Morgan. I was 32, working as a marketing specialist for a reputable agency in a city that never sleeps. I had a modest but cozy apartment, a reliable car, and family I believed would be my safety net. But that belief was about to be shattered. The economy was teetering on the edge when the layoffs started, a slow bleed at first, then a flood. The morning the announcement came was gray and heavy, the kind of morning where the air feels thick with uncertainty. Sitting in that conference room, listening to the CEO drone on about restructuring and difficult decisions, I watched my colleagues' faces fall one by one. 75% of us were out. Me included. The severance package was a cruel joke, 2 weeks' pay, barely enough to cover rent, let alone bills, groceries, or the looming student loans that whispered threats every month. I left the building clutching my box of belongings, my heart sinking deeper with every step. I told myself it was temporary, that 3 months of savings would buy me time to find a new job. But as days stretched into weeks, the job market tightened like a noose. Thousands of professionals competed for a handful of openings. My applications vanished into voids, my phone stayed silent. Panic crept in. I reached for the lifeline I thought would hold me, my family. My father, Richard, was the first call. A man I barely knew but had hoped would offer some support. I dialed, heart pounding. When he answered, the background noise of golf commentary drifted through the line. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling, "I'm in trouble. I lost my job, and rent is due next month. Can you help me?" There was a pause. Then his voice, sharp and distant, "You should have saved better. Your generation always expects handouts." The line went dead. That moment was like a punch to the gut. My father, the man who had raised me, however imperfectly, had shut the door in my face. Next, I tried my mother, Diana. Her voice was saccharine, warm on the surface but hollow beneath. "Oh sweetheart, we're praying for you," she said, "but we just renovated the kitchen, and your father's golf membership fees went up. Maybe cut back on those fancy coffees. Fanciful coffee drinks." I was surviving on instant noodles and tap water. I hadn't touched a coffee shop latte in weeks. Then there was Michael, my brother. A man I had lent money to during his own rough patches, without hesitation. But his memory was short, and his generosity forgotten. "Maybe if you hadn't wasted money on that apartment and those clothes, you'd have something to fall back on," he snapped. I remembered the modest studio I rented, the thrift store dresses I wore, the sacrifices I made silently. Desperation made me swallow my pride. I asked for a family dinner, a chance to explain, to be heard, to find compassion. That night was a nightmare etched into my memory. My mother served pot roast with the same practiced smile she always wore, while my father nursed a glass of whiskey, barely glancing at me. Michael and his wife, Rebecca, arrived late with their children, who immediately dashed off to the basement. I spoke quietly, carefully, about layoffs, eviction threats, and the job search that felt endless. Rebecca rolled her eyes. "This is what happens to irresponsible millennials," she scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. My father checked his watch several times, his impatience palpable. My mother suggested, with a cruel kindness, that perhaps it was time I found a husband, someone to solve my problems for me. And Michael's words, they broke something inside me. We have real responsibilities, he said, voice cold, real families to care for. You only have yourself to worry about. The weight of those words crushed me. Driving home, tears blurred the streetlights into streaks of shame and sorrow. The next morning, Michael's final message came: "Don't contact us until you get your life together. We can't keep bailing you out." Bailing out. They had never bailed me out, not once, through all my struggles. Weeks blurred into a haze of selling belongings, scraping pennies, and sleeping in my car. I learned to wash in public gym bathrooms, to eat protein bars and apples, to hide my story behind a brave face. But the deepest wound wasn't the eviction notice taped to my door. It was the silence from those who should have been my refuge. When the door to my apartment slammed shut behind me for the last time, I didn't just lose a roof over my head, I lost a piece of my dignity, my hope, and the belief that someone, anyone, was in my corner. I remember the weight of that eviction notice in my hands, stark, official, merciless. 72 hours to leave the place I had called home for 4 years. That night, my Toyota Corolla became my refuge, and my prison. I carefully packed the few belongings I could carry, a battered laptop that still hummed with promise, a few changes of clothes folded meticulously in plastic bags, sentimental tokens that no amount of hardship could compel me to leave behind. Everything else was boxed and shoved into a tiny, rented storage unit, paid for with the last credit card I dared to use. Sleeping in a car is a lesson in vulnerability. Every rustle outside, every flash of headlights through the windshield jolted me awake. I learned the rhythms of the parking lots, which once tolerated overnight stays, which had the kind of security that meant I could at least rest with one eye closed. Walmart became my sanctuary. The glow of fluorescent aisles and the murmurs of late-night shoppers were my lullaby. Hygiene became a battle. I clutched my gym membership like a lifeline, not for the workouts but for the showers, those brief moments of warmth and cleanliness that allowed me to look in the mirror and remember the person I once was. I mastered the art of washing my hair over the sink, of changing clothes in cramped locker rooms without touching the floor. My days followed a relentless, exhausting routine. Wake before dawn, often at 5:30 a.m., to avoid security patrols. Drive to the gym, shower, and don carefully chosen professional clothes I kept hanging in the back seat. Arrive at the library by 9 a.m., where I camped out for hours, sending out dozens of job applications. Live on protein bars, apples, and whatever food could survive in my tiny cooler. Return to the car at night, recline the driver's seat as far as it would go, wrap myself in the only blanket I owned, and try to sleep, all while my mind raced with fear and shame. The hardest wound wasn't the physical discomfort or the gnawing hunger, it was the shame. The overwhelming feeling that I had failed, not just myself, but the family who was supposed to be my safety net. I wrestled nightly with the question, how could they abandon me like this? Weeks blurred into one another as I buried myself in survival. Then came the unexpected. One afternoon at the library, as I hunched over my laptop, a tap on the shoulder startled me. "Eliza." It was Marcus, a former colleague from Market Trends. His familiar smile was like a brief flash of sunlight in my bleak world. "How have you been?" he asked gently, and for the first time in months, I almost broke down. We caught up over coffee, and he shared that he had started a small marketing consultancy, a lean, scrappy operation but one that needed someone with my skills. The pay was modest, far from my previous salary, but it was a start. I accepted without hesitation. That tiny studio apartment I found afterward was a far cry from my former life, questionable safety, unreliable hot water, noisy neighbors, but it was a door back to stability. Still, money was tight. To make ends meet, I took an evening bartending job at the Rusty Nail, a dimly lit bar with a gruff but fair owner named Tony. I spent my days at Marcus's office, learning new software, volunteering for difficult projects, and my nights pouring drinks and talking to strangers. Sleep was a scarce commodity, often 4 hours, sometimes less. Some nights, exhaustion overwhelmed me, and tears streamed down my face on the walk home, tears born not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of relentless struggle. At the Rusty Nail, I met Stephanie, a law student juggling school and bartending to pay the bills. Our shared exhaustion forged a quick friendship. When she mentioned needing a new place to live, I suggested we become roommates. Splitting rent was a relief, a small but vital step toward reclaiming control over my life. Meanwhile, Marcus noticed my dedication. After 6 months, he increased my hours and pay, calling me the hardest worker he'd ever met. I soaked in every moment of encouragement, every small victory. In stolen hours between shifts, I completed free online courses, digital analytics, social media, content strategy, building skills from scratch, rebranding myself one certificate at a time. The day came when I realized I had gone hours, even days, without my family's abandonment creeping into my thoughts. I wasn't ready to forgive them, that wound was raw, but the silence in my mind was a sign I was healing. That healing was fragile. The world had not yet offered me peace, but I was learning to claim it myself. The day they came back was unlike any other. I was sitting in the quiet sanctuary of my new home, a modest house I had painstakingly purchased with every ounce of hard work and sacrifice, sipping coffee on the wooden deck I had grown to love. The morning was calm, the air crisp, and the birds sang with an innocent joy that felt at odds with the storm about to descend. Then came the doorbell, insistent, loud, breaking the fragile peace. I opened the door, expecting a delivery or a neighbor, but standing there were the faces I thought I'd left behind forever: my father Richard, my mother Diana, my brother Michael, his wife Rebecca, and their 2 children, all burdened with suitcases and an air of entitlement that chilled me to the bone. "Surprise!" my mother exclaimed, arms stretched wide for a hug I refused to return. They stepped into my home as if it were theirs, wandering, touching, claiming. My father inspected my crown molding with a critic's eye, my mother critiqued my cabinet colors loudly, Rebecca catalogued my refrigerator's contents with disdain. The children ran rampant, invading the sacred private spaces I had carved out for myself, my carefully curated bookshelves, my personal office, their muddy shoes leaving marks on my floors, their laughter drowning out my protests. "Mommy says this will be our room," Emma announced as she bounced on my bed, her brother claiming the spare bedroom as a playroom. I tried to maintain composure, reminding them gently, "Please don't touch that. That's my bed." But their sense of ownership was brazen. Michael's casual remarks cut deeper than any knife: "We've given notice on our apartment. The landlord raised rent. We thought, well, family sticks together, right? You have space. You can help us." I stared at him, this man who had once abandoned me at my lowest, now standing in my living room as if I owed him a place to stay. My mother chimed in with hollow excuses about financial setbacks, retirement funds lost in the market crash, and the impracticality of hotels. They had sold their house, the one they lived in for 30 years, and expected to move in here, with me, in the home I had bought with my own sweat and tears. Their plan was laid bare: they would take the bedrooms, push me into the basement, expect me to bend to their needs, all without a shred of remorse for the years they left me alone. The final blow was Michael's voice, dripping with condescension. "You don't have a family to worry about. No husband, no kids. You owe us." I was speechless. Not because I lacked words, but because the sheer audacity was overwhelming. These were the people who had told me not to contact them until I got my life together. The same people who had let me live in my car, who never called to check if I was okay, who made me feel like a burden, now acting as if my home and my success were their inheritance. When I finally found my voice, it was calm but resolute. "You will not be moving in. This house is mine. I earned it. I built it without you." My mother's tears fell freely, but they felt more like manipulation than remorse. My father's anger simmered, accusing me of selfishness. Michael's threats hovered in the air, promises to turn the extended family against me, to brand me as the villain. But I was no longer the girl who trembled behind closed doors. I called upon my chosen family, friends who had stood by me when blood relatives walked away, and together, we faced the storm. As they unpacked their belongings in my home, my sanctuary, I felt an icy numbness settle inside me. Each suitcase laid on my floor was a reminder of the years lost, the pain endured, and the unspoken debts of betrayal that hung heavy in the air. Their presence was loud, invasive. The children's careless footsteps echoed in the rooms where I had whispered my hopes into the quiet walls. Rebecca rearranged my furniture as if I were a mere tenant in my own house. My mother, with her glistening eyes and trembling voice, insisted this was temporary, a family sticking together through hardship. But I knew better. This wasn't about hardship, it was about entitlement. I watched Michael's eyes as they flickered with impatience and resentment. He had always worn the mask of responsibility, but beneath it lurked a selfishness I was only now fully understanding. "You owe us," he said again, a phrase that twisted in my gut. Oh. I had poured years of my life into helping him, had loaned him money he never fully repaid. When I needed him most, he was nowhere to be found. My father's voice broke the silence, cold and sharp. "After everything we've done, this is how you repay us." I met his gaze without flinching. "The only thing I owe you is the truth, that you abandoned me when I needed you, and now you expect to take what I built for yourselves." My mother's tears flowed freely, but they no longer had the power to soften me. Her words were a well-worn script of guilt and manipulation, but I had learned to see through the act. The weight of years of neglect pressed down, but a new force stirred within me, the fierce determination to reclaim my life, my space, and my dignity. I was no longer the desperate woman begging for crumbs of compassion. I was a survivor standing her ground. Nathan, Stephanie, and Marcus, my chosen family, arrived at the house just as the tension reached a breaking point. Their presence was a balm, a shield, a silent affirmation that I was not alone. Together, we navigated the storm of accusations, tears, and demands. I recorded every conversation, every promise, every veiled threat. Because words are powerful, and evidence is necessary when trust has been broken. In the days that followed, the battle spilled beyond the walls of my home. My phone became a battlefield of calls and messages, my father's voice alternating between rage and desperate negotiation, my mother's tearful pleas mixed with guilt trips, Michael's cold silence punctuated by social media posts painting me as the villain. But the tide was turning. Unexpected allies emerged. My Aunt Martha, the family rebel, called to offer understanding and apology for their silence during my hardship. My cousin Edward reached out with cautious empathy, offering friendship without judgment. These small gestures cracked the fortress of isolation I had built around myself. Within the chaos, I found clarity. My therapist's words echoed in my mind: family is not a one-way street. Forgiveness is for your peace, not permission to be hurt again. I began to untangle the complex threads of love, obligation, and self-preservation. The girl who had once begged for help was no more. In her place stood a woman who chose her family, those who showed up, who supported, who celebrated her, not those bound by blood but by genuine care. Days turned into a relentless procession of heavy conversations and cold silences. My phone's screen glowed with an unending stream of texts and calls, each one a new battlefront in a war I never chose. Richard's voice, once a source of distant authority, now crackled with a mixture of frustration and veiled threats. "You don't understand what you're risking," he warned, his words dripping with bitter disappointment. "You'll regret this decision for the rest of your life." But beneath the threat lay something more profound, a grief twisted by pride, a sorrow masquerading as anger. Diana's messages were tearful, suffused with guilt, but laced with manipulation. "I can't sleep knowing my baby is turning her back on us," she whispered through words. And Michael, silent on the phone but vocal on social media, painted a picture of betrayal that twisted the truth with the ease of a practiced storyteller. Their narrative was clear: I was the ungrateful daughter, the cold sibling, the one who shattered family harmony. Yet beneath this cacophony, cracks appeared. Martha, my aunt, broke the chorus of blame with honesty and remorse. "I remember the nights you cried alone," she said, voice soft yet resolute. "I wish I had reached out sooner." Edward, my cousin, offered cautious support, a reminder that even in fractured families, compassion can linger. Amidst the turmoil, my therapist's words became a lifeline. "Boundaries are acts of love, for yourself," she reminded me during one raw session. "I see now," I whispered, tears slipping down my cheeks, "that forgiving them doesn't mean giving them access to my life." Each session peeled back layers of buried pain and unspoken anger. I relived moments of neglect, the sting of abandonment, and the heavy weight of expectations never met. The realization settled deep inside: my family's love had always been conditional, tied to convenience, utility, and their own comfort. And I was done being a hostage to that love. The final confrontation at my house was more than a physical gathering. It was a crucible where years of resentment, hurt, and shattered trust were laid bare. I stood firm, articulating boundaries with a clarity born from pain and hard-won self-respect. "You will not walk back into my life demanding what you never gave," I said, voice steady. "You will respect my home, my choices, my peace." The silence that followed was heavy but necessary. As they packed their bags and left, I felt the simultaneous ache of loss and the fierce thrill of freedom. My chosen family, those who showed up without condition, rallied around me. Nathan, with his quiet strength; Stephanie, with her laughter and light; Marcus, with his unwavering belief in me. Together, we built a new circle of support and love. I painted the walls of my home with bold colors, each stroke a declaration: "This space is mine." I displayed my books and memories proudly, no longer hiding from the past but owning my story. I updated my emergency contacts, replacing old names with those who had earned the title of family. And with each day, the girl abandoned and broken faded further, replaced by a woman who defined her own worth. In the quiet aftermath of their departure, a strange stillness settled over my home, a silence both heavy and freeing. It was a silence filled with unanswered questions, aching wounds, and the daunting possibility of starting anew. For years, I had equated family with obligation, a chain of expectations that bound me to pain, betrayal, and unspoken resentments. But now, I faced the profound truth: family is not simply defined by blood. It is defined by who shows up when the world turns its back. Therapy became my sanctuary. Each session was a journey through tangled emotions: grief, anger, guilt, and ultimately, acceptance. I learned that forgiveness is a gift to oneself, not an invitation for old wounds to reopen. I discovered the power of boundaries, not as walls to shut others out, but as fences to protect my soul. With careful intention, I began to redraw the lines of my life. I nurtured relationships that uplifted me, friends who celebrated my successes and held me steady during storms. Nathan, whose steady presence became a beacon of trust. Stephanie, whose laughter rekindled joy in the darkest moments. Marcus, whose faith in me never wavered. I transformed my home into a sanctuary, painting walls in colors that spoke of strength and renewal, filling shelves with books that told stories of resilience. I replaced old emergency contacts with those who truly cared, engraving new names into my life's narrative. The woman who had been abandoned, who once lived in a car and hid her tears, was no longer who I was. I had become a testament to endurance, to reclaiming power and rewriting destiny. The ghosts of my past may linger, but they no longer dictate my story. I stand now, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a survivor, a woman who chooses her family, her home, and her peace. And if you find yourself walking this difficult path, know this: your worth is not defined by those who turn away. It is found in the courage to stand, to heal, and to love yourself fiercely. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we find strength in truth, and hope in new beginnings.